Hello then, Year 5, Mr. White here, and now I'm going to go through the vocabulary that we will be using in our science topic this week, this term, which is all about life cycles and living things and reproduction. So, what is a life cycle? A life cycle is a series of changes that living thing does that goes through from the beginning of its life until it actually reproduces. Some would say until it dies. But actually that's technically not part of the life cycle. So any living thing, be it bird, animal, plant, mammal, any living thing that has a life cycle and will start, will grow, will develop into maturity, will have offspring of its own, and then it will decline and it will die, and the offspring will then go through that cycle. So it's a continuous sequence of changes undergone by an organism from one primary form as a gamete, which is its basic male or female cells form, into the development of the whole same form. So it's this whole cycle going round and round and round of leading to reproduction and then reproduction and then reproduction. So the main stages of a life cycle are fertilization. This is where the gametes join together. So the male and female gametes join together to fertilize. So that might be, as we've looked at in plants and seeds. So the pollen goes into the plant and that then fertilizes the new seed. That seed would then land on the ground and would grow through its immature stage, so through its young stage, until it reaches immaturity. Maturity is when it is able to reproduce itself again, and that is the reproduction bit, and then it goes round and round and round that cycle again. Obviously that individual plant or animal or amphibian or insect or whatever it might be, once it's past its reproduction phase, will go into decline and will eventually die off. But that's kind of like a loop in the life cycle. The life cycle goes fertilization, growth, maturity, reproduction, fertilization, growth, maturity, reproduction, and so on and so on and so on. So sexual reproduction, I know we've looked at this in plants and we'll be looking at it in other animals. So sexual reproduction is when the female and male materials or gametes combine to produce offspring. So you need a male gamete, a female gamete, and they combine to produce offspring. So in a plant, it's when the pollen runs down and fertilizes the seed. So that's sexual reproduction. But there is another kind, asexual reproduction, where the offspring might just be created from one plant. In fact, there are even some creatures that do that. So there's no combination of male and female gametes coming from elsewhere. The plant basically just starts growing new forms. And if you look outside in our breakout area, there is actually a spider plant, and you can see from that and see if you can work out what kind of reproduction that spider plant is doing and how that actually works. There's a lot of evidence on that spider plant to help you decide. Now, metamorphosis is a biological term. It means a striking change in form or structure of an individual after hatching or birth. So, for example, a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, it metamorphosizes into a butterfly. A tadpole metamorphosizes into a frog. So it changes from one very simple form into a completely different form in its adult life. So when it's a small, immature form is one thing, and then when it turns into an adult and is able to reproduce, it completely changes or metamorphosizes into a different structure. So we did this, we looked at the various parts of a plant, and I know you enjoyed that. So the ovaries, the stigma, the style, all in the pistil. Those are the female parts of the plant, the female reproductive parts, and the male reproductive parts are obviously the anther, the filament, and the petal. So the plant will have both, but they tend not to want to fertilize themselves because obviously that doesn't create the strongest plant. The petals are really there just to attract insects and bees and what have you in, so they get themselves absolutely covered in the pollen, which they then move on to fertilize other plants. So those are the various parts of a plant, and I know we've done that because we were dissecting plants earlier this week. Now, what is an insect? An insect is a creatures that have bodies with 3 different segments, and they usually are protected by a hard shell. So they have an external skeleton. They have 3 pairs of legs and 2 antennae at the top. What are amphibians? Amphibians are cold-blooded, smooth-skinned vertebrates, i.e. they have a backbone, which during part all of their lives can move and breathe both on land and water. That is usually earlier. So, you know, if they're underwater, it's usually in the early part or the immature part of their lives. And when they reach maturity, they tend to need to breathe outside the water. But so, for example, a frog is an amphibian and it can live in the water or out of the water, but it has to breathe out of the water. So in my pond at home, the frogs stick their noses out of the water to breathe. Now, what is a mammal? Well, we're mammals. Mammals are animals that breathe in air, has a backbone, and grows hair at some point during its life. Well, that's me. I've got hair. I breathe. I have got a backbone. So I am a mammal. In addition, female mammals have glands that help produce milk, which obviously feeds their young. But male mammals obviously can't produce that milk, so we can't feed the young when they're first born. So that's what a mammal is. It's generally a warm-blooded animal that breathes air, has a backbone, and grows hair as it moves into maturity. That's it. I hope you learn those terms well, because you'll certainly be needing them during our lessons this term. And I look forward to sharing with you more information in next week's videos.